Inspiring and motivating talk. We'll move forward to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Bala Kumble. He is the Managing Director of Innova Sierra Private Limited. He has over 30 years of experience in information and communication technologies, satellite communications and navigation, navigational aids, avionics, biomedical, mining, and smart grid technology. He will be talking about the programs in Australia that are created for university to industry transformation, specifically aimed at training PhD researchers to be industry ready. Please welcome Dr. Kumble.
Thank you very much for everyone being here. I know it's a Friday evening. I'll agree with you. So Friday evening I would have had a red and sit down and relax. But this is an opportunity I couldn't resist. And this is not because of anything else. One of the things, I think the question was asked, why do we all study? And one of the answers was for the betterment of the society. So we come of an age after we've studied something, learned something, done something, and come back, and there's a time that we want to give it back to society in some form. So it could be not necessarily money, it could be time, your advice, or your experiences. That's what we should share. So that is a motto, I think, if everyone has it, that we know we got an end game to play with. So pardon me, I'm not going to really talk to the slides. The slides are there just to prompt to see the cover of everything else. When I got a email from Nita, so we said they covered everything. I said I'm going to talk a little bit about every aspects of it so that I'll give you the perspective. The reason I'm going to give you the perspective is probably I'm sitting in the right place to get that information and then have the right interaction, not because of anything else, it's purely by design. A couple of things, let me talk to you about it before I get into the nitty-gritties of it. One is I run what we call as a research service provider under the Department of Industry. These are the groups that have been set up under the umbrella of Department of Industry, as we call it, OZ Industries, is to facilitate and capture and help industry in capturing their innovation. So that means I do have a view of what industry does and then what innovation they do, how do they need to structure. Just because some companies are doing very well in the thing, not necessarily they're capturing every innovation of it. The question is, when you do innovation, it's very important that you capture it so that next time you want to use it, you don't want to repeat and come back to the basics and redo it. So otherwise, there is no economies of scale built into the thing. That's one aspect. The second aspect is I also deal with as an expert panel member of Department of Industry for commercialization. So that means we look at all the startups and see, okay, what help do they need? Who needs what advice? One of the charters of that is to provide industry, university, and research group linkages. So that bakes into the heart of all the discussion that's happening, what are the opportunities are there. These days, the funding from Australian government, less than 10%, I should say, less than 10% is for discovery. So if you go and try to go and apply for a discovery project, it's very difficult. From this year onwards as well, they say that you need to have an industry partner even for discovery, not because of anything else. Industry partner does not have to provide any in-kind or cash or any component of it, but so you do need to have an industry partner into that. The next layer comes in is other things like normally ARC linkage grants and everything else. So that's the general scene of it. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this, and let me come back. This is my briefing. I'm given this list, so I was thinking about it and say, okay, one of the things in the list of things I wanted to talk about my journey. I'll start with my journey, not because I want to talk about myself. The question is that sets actually the scene. So I came to this country long time ago, so long time ago. So most of you probably wouldn't have, at the start, were not even born. So that was long time ago. So the things were very different. The world was very different. And when we were doing PhD, when we were trying to do, I think somebody asked about publication. The question was that we were in a time of no internet. So that's when we were doing our PhD. The only place we could get connectivity to what was published, go to the library, beg them literally. They would say, no, 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 they would have access in the evening, so they would have an access for half an hour. They need to find out and give us their literature research, and that's what would come. One of the things, when you go and write, when you're doing your PhD, this is a fundamental thing, that hasn't changed. When you're doing your PhD, that you need to publish, there are two reasons. One, your degree assessment comes out and says, okay, that have you published. The second thing is that at least when we were doing the PhD, one of the things was the peer review, the validations of it. Because unlike today, if there is an incremental innovation that you will get to know next day, right? Because it's a continuous, incremental innovation that everyone shapes around. So you know that. In my time, we would start up a project because we would go and do the literature's research, start up the project, and then if we didn't go and publish it immediately, some of the group somewhere in the corner of US would have done the thing, then you had to repeat everything. That means you had to change your problem. So we were in a lot more difficult things. So ours was an open-ended thing. So, so those days, and the money was shortcoming, but we all had our fellowships. That's a different thing. So irrespective of what the thing, one of the reasons that you want to publish as the start of your PhD is to make sure that there's a peer review. That's a validation, really. So it's not that your supervisor says you have done it correctly, but you want to go back and do the thing. So that was a basic entree into it. I will skip this. I don't want to come back. I just want to start off this one. This is not something I'm going to tell you guys what you already know. You work in a premier institutions. You know about it. What things have changed, I'm going to set the scene for this, is my time, innovations were slow because there was a pace at which you could do. You could capture, you had your time and do the thing. Today, the pace of innovation is so fast that the thing you learn, this is an interesting thing, the thing you do in PhD and come out into industry is already outdated. So the question comes in, okay? The question comes in, so what do I do in this environment? This actually was a question asked of me by APAC Vice Chancellor's Forum. They said, tell me about what do you think industry, what is the role of university? What does the university do? So I will answer that question in a little while, but this is an interesting question that we have to answer that question because if the students are coming from all over the world into Melbourne University or your competing university, let me not name any other university, we need to find out how does the university distinguish itself other than its brand name. Okay, so this is an interesting question that we need to answer because there's an answer Australian government tries to answer that question. So that means the question today is basically all of you when you're doing your PhD, it's not about what subject you have done. That's an expertise that you have already proven. You've done your master's, you're doing your PhD, you're only getting a framework of three things. One, can I go and research to find out what is new, what is applicable? Can I go and execute it? And can I go and communicate that? So if you have to do that, that means this is the training ground, not necessarily in the subject matter, but in a framework, how can you go and discover something new for the benefit of something else? That's all it is, because the minute you walk out, things will change. So that means it is basically capacity to adapt. And they need to understand what has changed from the time I did and what is changing every day. This is a moving feast basically. And so these are the questions were asked as part of the industry university collaboration and say what is an answer to that? So Department of Industry came back and said, okay, we need to have industry well embedded in university education. That is a fundamental thing. The problem, even though we're doing well, so only one way they could control was to control the industry like us, saying that if you want any money, any grant from us or any help from us, so you need to work with the university. The problem with university is this, so their KPI is very different. The KPI is, are you supervising the students? Are you publishing? I don't know how many publications per year average. One university says 7. I mean, yeah, that's enormous anyway. So, so that's an average. So that means you have to publish. But so I've been fighting with the Department of Industry to go and change the KPI in the university, which is something hopefully will happen some other today, tomorrow, or some other time, to come back and say that if you are doing a project, somebody asked a question about publication. If you're doing a PhD, and if there is a supervisor who can only work with industry or wants to work with the industry, do we keep that supervising a PhD student publication as equivalent to working with an industry? So that hasn't been resolved. Because there are various reasons for that. There is an economic reasons for that. There are what we call the peer reviews requirement. So that you're going to create 2 classes of people within the university. That's a debate still going on. Until such time, advice to you guys, doing a PhD, publish. You have to publish. There's no second thought about it. So, as Meenakshi said, you need to publish as you go. That's the best way to do that. Because, so you frame your project, frame your thinking, so that I can chunk them up and then can do that. Thank you. Okay, so there are various things based on the theory that the Australian government is, promoting this one. There is Industry Transformation Programs around, which basically focuses on PhD students being trained to be industry ready. Okay? I will explain. I'll come back and tell you that why that is required, and then that's a good one. That's what has to be done, so that the fundamental driver when you select your project. This is a conversation one has to have with your supervisor. One, you need to understand what is the implications of what I'm doing. So if I'm doing a research, whether it's a discovery project or an application project, you need to understand what is the downstream requirement is. If I'm doing something, why am I doing this one? Because that's going to have a specific application. It could be a very minute one. If you don't understand that, if you're not able to articulate, so that puts a barrier for you straight away. So you want to go into industry or any other research group, that is something you need to understand. Not necessarily demonstrate in your, PhD, but you need to have a view of what that should be. This is exactly. So where would my PhD, investigation is going to lead into? So if you don't understand that one, if you're not able to articulate that, that puts a barrier onto the thing. So I think I mentioned to you everywhere, this is the same thing, and so one of the things comes back, I think, to the framework of the things changing very, very quickly. One of the things you should always be looking for, I think, for the group of people who came from IIT and being a competitive world in India, so it's nothing no news that you need to prove that why somebody should give you a job. Why should somebody give you a job? So there are 2 reasons. One, okay, so that of course everyone equal, that everyone has done academically well, they published and do the thing. So how do I choose one person from the other? One, able to articulate, able to tell what is the context of my work. Why did I do this one? So this is the reason I'm going to do that. And many places, your job, the first job is based on the skills that you know the subject, but the selection of a person would also depend on the thing. Is the person adaptable? You need to demonstrate, okay, oh, by the way, I've done this microbiology, particularly, the bacterial infestation in soil, propagation in soil for the growth of a plant. So you need to demonstrate that I can apply that in a human environment. So any of those combinations of it. So that is a distinction that you need to make. So I got only a couple of minutes. So industry opportunity, there are several industry opportunities available. It's the question of how do you articulate why your research is relevant to industry is the fundamental thing you need to do. But the only difficulty in life sciences is the life sciences you do need, if you're not using a wet lab, then of course, then you can go into industry, the proper one, and then work with them. But if you want a wet lab, this is a major problem. So you need to think about, whether I would be starting my own industry or startup, or you're going to work for an industry. So those are the issues you need to, address, because particularly in medical and life sciences, things are moving so fast that industry collaboration is almost a must. For even industry, academic collaboration is a must. So we cannot actually distinguish these days, because in Australia we don't have that many independent, life sciences, biotech companies which do anything completely independent. They lead the way. They depend on academic research. So this is an issue. I will not address any of the PR. The PR issue is fundamental. Sunny will obviously talk about it. If you want any of the independent grants, or if you want to get any of permanent jobs in any, there is nothing like a permanent job. Any reasonable job in any industry, you need to have a permanent job. Okay, so this is an issue. You do need that, because one of the things I myself review many times is that people come back and say, okay, no, I want a job. I want to work with you. The first question my clients or anyone asks the question is that, oh, is it for your PR? Because they already know. So it's also very difficult to get a transition job, because even though you're sincere, you're going to contribute, that becomes a barrier. So I don't know how to resolve that issue. The only way you can go and resolve this issue, I think Melbourne has this program of internship. I don't know whether it's extended to PhDs, post-PhD, but its masters are there. I got a couple of them with me who work with me on that kind of a thing. So if that is so, even for PhD, I think you should volunteer to go and work somewhere, not necessarily for money, to go and actually get your hands dirty in an industry or anywhere else, because that will always come in handy for you. Okay, so that's one thing that. Okay, so there's another one. Okay, so it also depends on the field of expertise, what you do. I think Sarvjit is going to talk about what CSR are going to do, and then so depends on the area in which your expertise. But anyway, one of the fundamental things when you start your project in PhD, your research group, you need to thinking about where you want to go, where is going to be applicable, and then so that thought has to go in the beginning. It's not an afterthought. Never have an afterthought and say, okay, I've done my PhD, where do I get an employment? That's the wrong question. Ask that question beginning, so that always understand the relevance of what you're trying to do. Okay, so I will not, I will stop. I think I probably exceeded the time. The only other thing I will talk to you about, basically starting your own. If some of you are motivated, okay, to start your own, again, the same advice I would like to give you is that when you're doing a PhD, start thinking about it. Because that's where you start. Because you finished your PhD, people think, okay, I've done my degree, I deserve a job. So it doesn't work, because then you don't have enough motivation to go and start up your own thing. So better to start thinking about it. Not all startups need a lot of money. People think to have a startup you need a lot of money. That's not necessarily true. You need a good idea. You're able to convince somebody to come along and help you with the money, to tell them why they should invest, why you think it's going to be innovative, what do you think is going to make $1 tomorrow. So, as Meenakshi said, there are other things that you need to learn. Is the thing, you need to articulate your project, articulate why is that relevant in the downstream process, and then why, and then, they basically, and to come back and convince them to understand at the system level, not necessarily the nitty-gritty is just of it, that I understand in the relevance of this one. That's what I'm doing. This little thing is going to change something else. So any opportunity, lab presentations, internal ones you got to go and volunteer to go and present, write reports. The second thing is about all grant reports. I personally would tell you, every PhD student put their hand up and say, I'm going to help you write the proposal. You might have your own idea, supervisors buy that one. Okay, if it's going to be there, write it down. because you create your own job. Because there is significant amount of money the government of Australia really throws at this. That is something you need to be seriously thinking about it. And then another thing is that in research area, everyone knows everyone else. You don't go get a job by just going to applying to some job. So your anchor point is always your supervisor. Have that conversation, of course, and all the PhD students should know, never fight your supervisor. That's a no. No argument to your supervisor, okay? Other than on the scientific topic. So that's a very important thing. So your anchor point is a supervisor. You need to work with the supervisor from the day one until you get a job. Because after PhD, the best way to get a job is through referral. Okay? Last one, I'm going to come back and say, follow where the dollar is. Follow where the dollar is. It is fundamental. You need to follow the dollar. So you need to understand where the dollar is. I tell you, recently one of the guys and then postdoc and then wanted to get a job. And then I sent him NHMRC results, so $500 million or $350 million. They said, okay, we released that fund. I sent the list. Immediately I get an email back from saying, Bala, none of the guys I'm talking to got the money. I said, I didn't send that to you because of that. I sent it to you. Who else has got it? So you know who's got the dollar. I need to follow that dollar. Talk to my supervisor, refer me to that person, then I can get a job. So you need to think just outside the box and say, okay, follow the opportunities and the dollar. Even though you're a researcher, but we just, go into the details of it, but you need to be doing that from the day one. You build your where I want to be in 5 years' time, and I start my PhD, that's what you need to be going. That will change as you go, but you know what the methodology is, okay? So that's all. I will stop here. Okay, thank you very much. And everything about the PR and everything is on the top.
So we can have a couple of quick questions.
Yeah.
Quite a nice job. You mentioned a point regarding the